And give a big hand for Maxim Salnikov.
Good afternoon, dear developers, dear front-end developers, dear Angular developers, right? On my today's session, we'll know about how do we create better Angular apps. Why? Of course, all in the name of our customers, clients, and us, to make everyone happier. I'm Maxim Salnikov. I came to you from Norway, Oslo, where I organize lots of different activities for developers. Meetups, conferences, and I use this photo of me today because one of the next big upcoming events is NG Vikings, which is Angular conference very close to this place in Copenhagen. If you wish to know everything about Angular in details from the best speakers from around the world, including members of Angular team, of course, just search for this in Google. You'll be surprised by the lineup, by the price, by everything. End of May, NG Vikings, Copenhagen. And this is my Twitter. It could be useful for you because I will post the link to this slide deck shortly after my presentation. So it's available online. You can always refer to this. We'll have some code samples today. We'll have some links, so that might be useful. About our today's agenda. So to make your Angular application faster and better and lighter, there is no one big advice. There's always a set of small pieces. Most of them are really low-hanging fruits, so you can introduce them quite fast. So let's build today's discussion in form of recipes. This is why I have this tasty background. I think it's also very relevant for after-lunch event. So first, we'll know how does this or that method works. Next, how to start with this, and where to get more information. So we are limited in time, and of course we cannot dive super deep into this or that technique, but my goal is to give you at least the taste of how this could look and where to search further. In a big picture, web app performance, this is app, this is some code, and this is web, this is some network. Split into two large groups. First, it's groups introduced by some limitations, right? We always have some limitations, so we work with limitations. And for the network, it's definitely bandwidth, or maybe like stability of the network. And for our code itself, it's performance of this or that device where we run the code. And based on these limitations, we can come up with some simple like gotchas. Yes, if we are talking about limitation of bandwidth, yes, let's make our bundles smaller. If we are talking about code execution, obviously, let's optimize our code to make our UI working faster. And actually, smoothness of UI is, say, one of the, if not main, but at least the most visible criteria, right, of our application performance. Okay, let's go through these two groups today during my session. Network. Let's start from this. What are the solutions to make our app working, taking into account network limitations? As I already told, yes, the smaller the app, the faster it will be downloaded. But it's not like that simple, right? We can make like the overall size maybe a bit larger than one monolithic if we split it into chunks. But we as developers really want a perfect first load experience. So let's then, for the very first load exactly what we need for this load. Okay, that's also kind of strategy. And of course, the best network request is request which is never happening, right? So if we got something, let's cache it and reuse this. And let's start. First recipe. It's actually not the recipe, but more just a reminder for you. Don't forget to use production version of the build to get your bundle optimized in many senses, including the size, of course. And actually, this is meta tag. It It flags a flag which affects some of the settings of Angular compiler. First, we use AUT compilation. Yes, absolutely makes sense. Build optimizer to try to get rid of some unused code. Angular team does it best. And Angular service worker. If we use this, it will be registered and processed only in production mode. And last but not least, it executes this method, so we at least do not do change detection twice, like in development mode. A bit later about change detection itself. So don't forget to use this. I still see lots of projects, including some serious ones. If you open the console, you'll see something. Oh, whoa. It was generated and deployed using developer build for some reason. How to explore what's exactly inside your resulting bundle. There is a nice utility called source map explore. So you just add one more flag to generate the map, and you'll see a picture like this. If you zoom it, it's just all the bundle from all the libraries, your libraries, something from NPM that you use in Angular, in this particular build, and you can easily find something that you don't really use. In my sample, for some reason, I imported snack bar from Angular material, but I never use this in my app, so I can easily save 3.5 kilobytes of the code. Yes, nice way to visualize all your contents of the bundle. Next, recipe number 2, lazy loading. Lazy loading went a very long way in Angular history, and it's directly related to router. And maybe you know that exactly Angular router was the reason why there is no Angular 3 version, because it went way further in its development than, say, core modules of Angular. And to sync up the versions, they jump over Angular 3. But after all, we have something now that's quite simple to start using. I don't like to overuse word simple or just in programming sessions and articles, but here Angular team did its best for our better developer experience. So how does it work? Yes, as I already mentioned, we want to download only this particular code to start with the app, and we can maybe download something later. We can use special guard if we want to have some conditions on loading what and when. To further optimize the user experience, we can preload all the rest, or not all the rest, or some modules in the background when we have at least our home screen up and running. And it's as flexible as you can imagine. So we can introduce our own rules of what to load when. How to start with this? It all starts with splitting your application into modules. For many projects, like small projects, it's totally fine to have one main module, one and only module. But if you wish to go for lazy loading, you have to think about this kind of split, because it's based on modules. So you can lazy load only modules. So okay, we provide the special key, or you name it after in routes configuration, and inside this lazy loaded module, we have our own set of routes starting from the parent route. So yeah, it's as simple as really using load children flag in your routes configuration. Then, in this module, you can also provide strategy, and the one which is like included by Angular team for you, preload all modules. If you wish to preload everything in the background after the main bundle loaded and started. If you wish to have something custom, you are welcome to provide your own loading strategy. It's absolutely possible. Okay, let's go next. And the next recipe is about caching and using the cache. Maybe some of you folks were on my previous morning session where I went through PWA for Angular in details, and I introduced two options. How do we provide this experience? For this session, this will be really brief, say, reminder of how it's possible to set this up quite fast. And it's really not that long. For many projects, it's just OK to run the command to apply schematics, Angular PWA, and then run production build. What we have, after all, if we test our application in the browser, we'll have application shell ready to serve us, which is basically application UI, pre-cached and ready to work offline, plus configurable way to cache and then reuse our data requests. By this, I mean different calls to our APIs, external APIs, etc. Plus, this schematics generates default view version of web app manifest, which is a JSON file saying to this browser or to this platform how to think about this set of JavaScript, HTML, CSS, whatever, how to think about this like about application. So you have to provide name, default icons, and maybe some other settings. OK, back to application shell. What will it give to us? In online mode, if you have this privilege, we don't go to network anyway. We try to load the UI from cache. If not, of course, we kind of fall back to network. In offline, we behave absolutely the same way. We go to cache, and if it's there, we serve the UI, which will look like this. So if you turn off the network, disable cache, you will still see your application up and running, and literally no more actions from your side. It goes out of the box. If you wish to fine-tune some options, you are welcome to do this. So in super short explanation what service worker does, so it actually changes this behavior when we have our app connecting to the cloud or network or internet directly. So we now have this service worker which is doing all the magic for us using cache storage. And this is not HTTP cache, like not the old gold one we all know, which is like really challenging to control. This is a special type of storage. Luckily, we have this in all Evergreen browsers at the moment. If you need to do some reconfiguration of what to cache in application shell and what to cache later when you want to cache your, say, API calls, you are welcome to change this configuration, which is located in NGSW-config JSON after you run this schematics, of course. Yeah, I will not go through all the details, just some simplest example how you, for example, set up caching of your dynamic data. Say for API/archive, you can provide different strategies like performance, where we try to get cache first, or freshness, which is network first. Looks interesting and simple, but there are always pros and cons. So some important things we have to keep in mind if we go for PWA. With Angular or with Angular and Workbox or any other frameworks, this is just generic notices about how PWA works in general. After all, you will ask the browser to download assets of your application shell twice. And this is one of workarounds of PWA idea in general, not PWA, but application shell architecture. First version of these assets will go to main thread to be rendered, and then service worker will download the same set, and the HTTP cache is not accessible yet, to cache this. So we have to keep this in mind. It's really good to have, it's not obligatory, but nice to have some notice to the user when app version was updated. It's also absolutely possible to implement with few lines of code in Angular using both Angular Service Worker or Workbox or some other libraries. But don't forget about this. Don't be tied to Angular Service Worker. Have a look at other alternatives like Workbox. I mentioned, I believe, it for the third or fourth time. And it can only be a part of progressive enhancement. I mean, you cannot say, OK, wow, this is really cool. Now we cache everything, and we don't care about network conditions anymore for all our clients. Unfortunately, at the moment, it works not everywhere, and not all works in all the browsers. So keep this in mind. If you cannot enhance your app in this or that browser, at least don't ruin this. So think. Keep in mind this feature detection. This is something that we have to use. Nice. Next recipe is actually a transition between network optimization and code optimization, and you will understand why. It's about server-side rendering. Really briefly, what's this at all? If you load, if you check the source of an Angular application, like download it from some host, your app or not your app, you will see something like app root loading. When you check the original source, right? Not elements in DevTools, not the rendered application. Obvious, right? So Angular builds all the UI by running JavaScript. So, and it's called Bootstrap. So we'll see something meaningful, some UI only after a few moments needed to first download all the assets, all the HTML, JavaScript, and then to actually build it, right? And until then, we'll see something like loading message. So this is not something that's called meaningful, right? And we can fix this. By server-side rendering, I don't even give example of HTML you'll get here because it will look totally awful for us, for humans. It will, but it's perfect for the browser because the browser loves simple HTML, which is not constructed by JavaScript. So it wants to get the HTML and CSS in line one to render something immediately. You see that I made it a bit longer because resulting HTML will be bigger. And so we kind of making network optimization a bit worse, right? But we have overall optimization better because we'll see meaningful paint at this point because we did all the dirty job on server, real time or pre-render it. It's up to us, but our users will see UI quicker. That's really cool. And then we can do all this JavaScript stuff. It's fine to have say something, some UI. Maybe it's not fully alive yet, but we have this few moments to make it real. So what we get here? Better first load experience in most of the cases. It's important for social medias when you want to, I don't know, share the URL of your app on Twitter, on Facebook. Most of these networks are silly when it comes to render content. They want to see real HTML. They cannot do this Angular job for you. And to some extent, it's still better for search engine optimizations. Search engines, they do their best to pretend that they are browsers, they can render everything themselves, but still, there are plenty of limitations, which makes this quite important technique. If you want to have the perfect visibility in search engines. How to do this? Well, first notice, do not explain that for some real-life project, this will be one liner or few lines of code. If this is like real-life app with some UI more complex than Hello World, you will have to do some manual job. Why? Because when you render Angular script or JavaScript on the server, it knows nothing about some objects which you have in the browser, like window, navigator, document. So Node.js and ASP.NET Core, they know nothing about this, right? So you can mimic this using some libraries, but it's better to put some conditions in your code. Other than that, there are at least two ways to start with. Really great blog post by Mark Piezak. Again, schematics. You run ng-add something, and what's possible to automate will be automated for you. What's possible to automate? It doesn't mean that you will get your working solution after this. Again, for Hello World, yes, you will get it. For your real app, you might want to do some code updates. Yes, NG Universal, this is official offering from Angular team. From community side, we have other interesting project called NG Toolkit, which is also including some schematics for us to automate all these boring setup tasks to give some extra files to your Angular source to set up Node.js and express routes. All this stuff we can do manually, and on angular.io you'll find the guide how to do this. But if that's possible to automate, why not to go for this option? Yes, so two options, they both are in a good state, and they will help you a lot with starting your way. And I'm not sure about NG Toolkit Universal, but in NG Universal Express Engine, you have at least two options how to do server-side rendering exactly. And so first, if your home screen is super dynamic, you have, I don't know, list of news, and you have to do this, you can build everything on the server and in Node.js or in .NET Core on the fly. Of course, this might affect all these milliseconds required to start the app. But yeah, if you need to build really dynamic site, yes, it's the only option for you. Other option is pre-rendering, and basically you can pre-create everything on build step, and you deploy not index.html with app root tag and loading in between this opening and closing tag, but you deploy already pre-rendered UI, and you can populate it later by XHR calls. That was about server-side rendering. Let's move on. And now we are in code execution area in this second big block of possible optimization. And mostly we are talking about change detection here. What is this and why it does affect performance, at least like very visible performance of your application? So what's going on when we update this or that piece of UI of our app based on some event? So first we need a trigger for this event, like user click or, I don't know, XHR request or timer. These all are triggers. And between this what's triggered and the UI is ready, some things are happening. In particular, first we run through all the event handlers. If we have something connected to this trigger, yes, we have to check all these things. Then we are caring about data. We don't want to have stale UIs or UIs with old data, so we have to check if we get correct data to render, right? And yeah, in strict terms, exactly this called change detection. What's next? We have everything ready in like memory. We have to update UI itself, and this is quite expensive operation, updating document object model, updating what our user exactly see on the page. And of course, the fewer updates we have, the faster the UI will be. What about, I mean, fast? What is this exactly? I bet you all know that it's considered that we as human beings think about something on the screen as about smooth if it has 60 frames per second update. It means that we have only 17 milliseconds for all these operations if we want to get feedback that, wow, this UI is smooth. Let's try our best to achieve this goal. And again, we start with strategy. What do we want to have exactly to get 60 FPS, taking into account all this change detection flow we have in Angular? Obviously, every change detection, if that's fast, the faster it is, the better. Also, we have number of these detections, and we definitely want to reduce this. And after all, to render something, we want to touch document object model as fewer times as possible. Good, got it, and let's go for recipes again. And we start with advice about using pipes versus methods in our templates. Next, on my next slides, we'll use as an example some kind of Twitter client, super light, which is actually loading only like one or two feeds of tweets and does nothing. And in this list of the tweets, we'll have we want to show not the real date, but date compared to today. So instead of just direct date, we want to say, was it yesterday or today or a few minutes ago? And at the moment, we have to use some JavaScript calculations and functions for this. As I know, this date manipulations will become a part of browser APIs quite soon, but for now we have to use JavaScript. Okay, and if we call this method, if we call this functionality in form of method in our template, yes, we call the actual code, which is actual doing this calculation on every time of change detection. If we go for the pipe, it's actually calculated only when something was changed. Let's illustrate this. So this is the app I promised. And have a look at the console log. Inside this method, I have this console log output. And obviously, we have this change detection on the load, right? And then every time we click on the button detect changes, we do the same calculations again and again and again and again. And as you see, this detect changes button is not related to this feed at all. So it could be some totally different part of the UI. Furthermore, do you know what do I have inside this click method of this button? What could it be? It's just empty method. It's just a click. It does nothing, but it starts change detection because this is the behavior of Angular engine. So it has to check all the triggers. Are they empty or not? Are they related to this part of UI or not? By default, it's done like this. If we use pipe, the picture is a bit different. So yes, we have this 20 detections because there are 20 items on the load, but then we click on the button and on the click, on the click we have this console log CD start. So it's not 100% empty. We see that any click, we do click, 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 and nothing happens. This is because we changed this to pipe. How to do this? Just create your custom pipe. It's way simpler than it sounds. So you just use this syntax. Basically, you wrap your code of your method into this pipe. And another really good outcome is that you can reuse this pipe in any other piece of your application. Next, we can even improve this behavior. Why? Just imagine, on this list of tweets, we have some tweets with absolutely the same date, like up to like milliseconds. So its date is the same. Then we can think, why do we do these calculations to make them like relative to today? Can we reuse some results that we already calculated for the previous similar date? Yes, we can. And this technique is basically called memoization in computer science. This is a strict definition from Wikipedia. It basically means some form of caching. Caching not of network resources, but results of method calls. And if we, so first demo and then code. We go back to the same app, same idea, but I added a bit more logging. And now I log both call of the pipe and call of the actual call, like method inside the pipe. And you see, in most cases, it goes one by one. So we call pipe and we do this calculation. But here we have, just have a look, boom, 5 calls of the pipe without following recalculation of the date. And it exactly means that, these tweets, they have all the same date, and we can reuse what we already calculated, and it still works fine. So yes, how to do this? Yeah, we can implement everything manually. That's possible, but we can use old gold Lodash library, which is still a good helper in our real life projects. There is a method called Memoize, and you can use it in more or less classical form, but here I introduce, say, Angular style of using this, which is decorators. So basically, you use Memoize decorator for your method, and it's done. It does all these interesting tricks for us. You'll see all the details on this awesome blog by Minko Gechev, and it's not a secret that my today's session is heavily influenced by Minko's sessions and articles, and Minko will be part of NG Vikings, by the way, and now he's a member of core Angular team. Okay, let's go next. Let's go next in the optimization of change detection, and let's talk about strategies. How to reduce the number of unneeded change detections. By default, it happens like this. So every time on any event and for every component. So we check all the components tree from the root to all the leaves. So just imagine, we have this green happy component where something happened. I don't know. You clicked the button or you got some data from a server, and it's related only to this branch, right? What happens in terms of change detection? Angular does its best to be very conservative in that sense and to double check everything. And this is why we do change detection for all the tree, and even this red branch, which is don't understand why do we run our change detections, because we are not related to this event at all. What do we want to achieve is to have behavior something like this. So to run change detection only where we expect it might really change UI. Of course, yeah, we are architects after all of our application, right? So we know which event could affect this or that change. This is why all custom strategies, they are not default. So Angular, again, does its best to cover all the use cases, all the scenarios. So you have to fine tune if you wish to have fast application. How to do this? Exactly Angular way. You have change detection property for your component, and you can say you can set it as on push. What does this on push mean? So first, don't mess up with web push notifications. Nothing related to this. It means that change detection for this component will run only if the input reference change, and by reference I mean that we pass say different object, not some changes in this one. This is important. So we are starting to talking about immutable structures, right? Next, obviously, Angular will run change detection for this component if this event happened in this component or its child. It's quite obvious decision. Also, we can run this explicitly, and this is, by the way, recommended way to stream data from, for example, your API calls to the templates when something changed in async pipe. It's also like good trigger to start change detection. Let's have a look at same sample. Default strategy. What's going on here? We do change detection, this empty button again, which is not related to the list of tweets. So first, by the way, if you notice, it happens twice. It looks like I use development build here, where Angular to do some extra checks run CD twice, and then on every click it happens. Even if the data, if we know in advance that data will not change. If we change it to on push for this component, yes, checks first, and then we click on the button. Of course, there is no change detection because we just turn this off for this particular component, for this particular case. In some cases, we have to go for our own schedule, as I mentioned, and this is recipe number 7. So first, we can disable change detection completely. We can run code totally outside of Angular, like Angular context, right? So how to how to come up with our own schedule, and when this is applicable. Just imagine that, for example, you stream some data from WebSocket to your UI, and this data is changing so fast that you don't even need to display these changes. So we are, because like again, we built UIs for humans, right? And maybe there is no even reason to update something every millisecond if you have this data flowing like this. So you decide, okay, I'm totally fine with 1 second delay of this update to not overload the browser and to keep everything else smooth. So what do? You just detach, you use method detach, and then on your own interval, on your own schedule, you do this change detection for you. So methods are detach, reattach if you want to like return to initial state, plus more things for us to have full control on this process. Next, how to run everything, something out of Angular context. Again, where it could be applicable, for example, for some I don't know, logging, where we just send data somewhere and we are not caring so much what will happen next. If this log request or like functionality will fail, we can survive, right? We just want to kind of outsource everything and kick it out from Angular. Just use ngZone and the corresponding method called run outside Angular. So very good name for exactly what it does. Nice. And our last recipe for today, it's about reducing the number of DOM re-rendering events. We all have lots of ng for loops in the apps, and we know, on the other hand, that these manipulations are quite expensive in terms of performance. And if we go for the immutable approach, which is must-have if we use on-push change detection strategy, it unfortunately recreates everything we send to the template. So how to start with track by? I believe it's again more reminder for you. Back to this sample with tweet feeds. Just use track by option in ng4 directive, and what do you pass is the name of the method inside your component, where you just give a hint to Angular. This is the field you can rely on in terms of this field is unique. Of course, it all makes sense only if you have some unique field in this data set. Then Angular engine, Angular renderer will understand, yes, I have to redraw on the UI not all the list of tweets, but only this particular tweet. Good, it's time to summarize. So let's go through all these points briefly again. Networking, what do we have here? Production mode, use lazy loading, use service worker as a part of progressivization of your application, and server-side rendering. It's SSR is not applicable to all the variety of the projects, but at least it's worth trying. And in the code execution block, what are advices? Pure pis instead of methods. Be creative with change detection strategies. Don't rely always on default Angular behavior if you really wish to have your app optimized. And just don't forget to use track by for ng4 loops. And on that, thank you very much. I believe we have 6 minutes for the questions. Yes, feel free to ask me something about Angular, about PWA, about NG Vikings. I'm yours. Or just come to me in person right after the session. I'll be here for some time. Good. Good. Thank you very much again.